Thank you very much for joining us. I'm now joined by Elizabeth Nderitu, Senior Manager for Sanitary and PhytoSanitary measures at TradeMark East Africa, an area that TradeMark has invested in a big way. And Elizabeth, I wanted to ask you, what is the connection between trade and standards?
Thank you so much, Kara. I think the easiest way to explain it is that if you need to access a market for your product, you need to demonstrate that you meet the requirements for that market. And that requirement is put in a standard. So standards are important for market access, and standards are also important because when you comply, you also improve your efficiencies and you save costs. So we cannot overemphasize the importance of standards. On a second note, as a consumer, sometimes you are not sure whether a product is safe enough for you to consume, to use on your skin, to use on your other operations like a farm operation or your farm animals or farm produce. And the best way to ensure that happens is to look at the certification of that product to show that it has complied to the standards for safety and for health and environmental reasons.
What are the leading challenges in adopting and enforcing standards in the region?
Again, this depends on the angle at which you're operating from. As a private operator, that is as a business, you may have challenges if you're not aware of the requirements that you need to meet in order to access that market. So you're not able to make your product or produce it in accordance to the market requirements if in the first place you don't have the awareness. Another challenge again from the private sector could be in terms of the capacity for you to comply. You may find that a standard requires you to upgrade your facilities and you don't have the finances at that point in time, you may not be able to comply. Now, from the side of the enforcers, you also need the infrastructure for you to enforce those requirements. This could come in terms of the laboratory services, and if you don't have the right equipment, the right human resources, the right capacity even for your personnel, you may have a challenge enforcing that standard.
TradeMark East Africa has done quite a lot in this area over the past years. What are some of the projects and programs you've run in the past or are currently running?
So we have a different mix of interventions, as we like to call them, or projects. Some of these are at the regional level, meaning they take place between multiple countries, and this is anchored in the regional economic communities. So for the past maybe 10 years, we've been working with the East African community, harmonizing standards in the EAC, so that when you comply to standards in one country, then you automatically comply to the requirements of that standard in the other country. That way you don't have to have, as a private sector member, a production line for one country and then another production line for another country. So that is one of the intervention in harmonization. We've not left the private sector behind. We've had projects for training, for capacity building, to allow them to comply to local standards in the region, and also in our international markets so that they can export their goods from the region to the rest of the world.
What are some of the specific interventions that you've carried out here in Kenya and across the region?
I mentioned that we have interventions that are regional, and some of them are very specific to countries. So in Uganda, in partnership with the Uganda National Bureaus of Standards, we are helping them to decentralize their services and take them closer to where they are needed, so that instead of businesses sending samples to Kampala, which may take a few days, they are able to access them locally within a day or so. So we are working with the Bureau to take services to Mbarara for the milk sector, and we're also helping them to procure equipment and install them in Bale for the maize sector. So we hope that will enable services to be available locally. In another example, we worked with the Rwanda Standards Board so that instead of businesses sending samples outside of the country and the continent, those services are available within a day in the country. So that cuts down the time and the cost of testing goods and makes our businesses competitive locally and globally. Most recently in Kenya, during the COVID times, during the challenges, we realized that businesses are procuring personal protective equipment and hygiene products which needed assurance, a form of assurance that they are safe to use and they are effective. So we worked with the Kenya Bureau of Standards to procure equipment to test PPE and hygiene products so that they are able to address the COVID-19 challenge as quickly and as effectively as possible. And we look to expand across the African continent when we expand across Africa through implementing the provisions of Annex 6 and 7 of the Continental Free Trade Agreement, which address SPS and TBT challenges. Thank you so much.
Elizabeth Nderitu, thank you very much for your time.
Most welcome.